Welcome to Gen Z Hoops, the Gen Z basketball, coaching, and sports business show.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Gen Z Hoops podcast. Today I'm joined by the Director of Player Development for the Cleveland Cavaliers, Coach Alex Sarama. Coach Sarama, how you doing, sir?
I'm great, Ashton. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, man. I really appreciate it. So I'd
Of
like to
course.
jump into our little conversation here. So can you talk a little about when you first got involved in the basketball? What made you want to become a coach, and basically where did that passion first arrive from?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in the UK and I loved basketball as a player, really keen. Played in the National League in England as a youth player, but I knew I'd never have a career as a player, and I wanted to be involved in the sport and go into basketball for a career, and I felt like coaching was the best way of going about that. So I started coaching really young when I was like 14, 15, just coaching the younger kids at my school. And then I actually started my own club when I was 16 in my hometown of Guildford in Surrey. And it was a great experience. I really learned a lot doing things the wrong way, but learning because of that. So we ended up being a really big club program. We had four full-time coaches. We had like 500 kids in the club, and I was running this from in my sixth form, so that would have been age 17 when I started the club. And I did that all through university. The club kind of really went well, really grew. And long story short, it's what led to me then getting an internship with NBA Europe, working in their London office in basketball operations, in their international basketball operations department. And that's kind of what started my whole career essentially. And obviously I loved that job, but I wanted to get into coaching. That was my passion, and work properly within a team environment, developing players, etc. So that kind of got everything going, and it's been 9 years since then of just continuous learning and always trying to find ways to get better, find the latest kind of evidence-based ideas, and just make sure I'm incorporating it into my coaching.
So let's take it back to like the early days when you first started coaching. Who were your biggest influences back then? Were there any mentors or anyone trying to like guide you down like the right path?
Yeah, I had no mentors, and I'm really glad I didn't, because I think if I did, I would have conformed to the traditional way of coaching basketball. And I think, part of why I think coaching methodologies in basketball have kind of stayed the same for the most several decades is we kind of had this never-ending perpetuating cycle of the same old drills, the same methodologies, the same beliefs constantly being shared. And I think because I came from I came from, outside. I was really in every job I've done. I've kind of come from the outside in, and I think that's what really has allowed me to bring a fresh perspective and just ask the question, is this the best way of doing things, or maybe there's a better way? So I did not have a mentor, but that said, I did spend a lot of time early on learning through the internet and watching all the coaching clinics on YouTube. And I definitely early on copied a lot of what I saw with celebrity coaches in the NCAA and the NBA. So, I was doing it that way. And then it was only when I came across the field of motor learning and I discovered that there was a whole evidence base for how we can coach in the sports world. And that's when I realized that really there's a far better way that can get players better faster. You can optimize performance in a better way than doing all the dominant approach drills and all of that. So that's what, when I discovered that, that was kind of a year and a half into my MBA job. So I was about 22, 23 at the time. And that really was a paradigm shift for me. And it just changed how I coached.
So you mentioned you worked in NBA Europe, you were associate manager and also worked in basketball operations as well. So you ended up managing initiatives across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. It's really massive. So what was your biggest responsibility on the day-to-day with that position?
Yeah, so really in that role, I had a great team I was working with. So that was all about basically growing the NBA's presence across the regions. So tangibly, what that looked like was we were running junior NBA leagues with all these different federations. Things like the NBA players in the region. We'd take care of player camps and help them organize player camps in their off seasons. A little bit of support with events like Basketball Without Borders, and then when they had NBA games in town, there would obviously be lots of programming around that. So a lot of the job was traveling to basically run coaching clinics and player clinics for these federations that we were doing these junior NBA leagues with. So yeah, it was a great introduction early on. It was a great way to build my network. But also, I learned a lot from my team. I think the business side of things was great, and it gave me a lot of skills, which I take into my coaching in the present day. Things like, my organizational skills and even little things like responding to emails in a punctual manner. I think it was really helpful for me to take that into my coaching career.
So you basically saw basketball through different lens, like different cultures, different countries, like they all play like a different style. What do you think about the different styles of basketball across the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of people talk about European basketball, but I think the thing that often gets missed in that is that every country is so different, and there isn't really one style that's unique to Europe. But you could be in Spain, and the forms of life and the social cultural constraints will be completely different to being in Serbia or France. But yeah, I love the ability to travel. I mean, I literally I went to over 40 countries through that job. So it was really eye-opening for me to be so young and literally traveling the world. I think that was invaluable for me, and it really helped me mature faster and just learning about all these cultural norms, etiquettes in all these different places. It was incredible. I think I really have a big international outlook, and I'm always looking for ideas outside of the NBA, and looking for ideas emerging everywhere. And I think that job really kind of instilled the importance of that in me early on.
I do agree though that each country has their different style of basketball. One thing that I think is constant throughout the overseas game, the physicality. I do think the physicality is like the same.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people like kind of like rag on the NBA, kind of saying like the game got softer over the years, since like the Jordan era to now. But like if you look at the overseas game, they're not calling like any like tic-tac fouls like how we get over here in the States. So I can agree with you on that note.
Yeah, definitely in FIBA, it's a lot more. I think it's interesting, kind of the NBA's going that way a little bit, just with more teams, full court pressuring now, like we see typically in Europe. So yeah, it's interesting.
I do think the NBA Finals this year, though, they did let them play a little more. Like we see, like guys like the Pacers and the Thunder, both really good defensive teams, so they're both picking up full court. They're letting guys like Nemhard and Neesmith, Caruso, Casey Wallace like hand check a little more, kind of like steer the ball handler a little more. So I do think they like let them play a little more, like especially this year in the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in parallel to this, you launched Transforming Basketball. Basically, just walk me through it. What made you start Transforming Basketball?
Yeah, absolutely. So transforming was really my vehicle for sharing all the practical takeaways and lessons I've been learning over the years applying an evidence-based approach. So I started transforming over 2 years ago. So that was prior to me joining the Cavs. And a lot of it was my work coaching in Italy, because that was where I really first figured out how to apply these evidence-based ideas on the court in player development, in team practices, in the weight room, for a return to play with a physio. So we started really going against the grain from what is conventionally done in basketball. And naturally, as we were doing all that, we were filming it all for us to learn and for us to reflect on things. And a lot of that content ended up becoming the basis of transforming. So I released a book over a year and a half ago now, and that was, very close to when I started, the brand. And that really led to some good momentum in the space, with more and more basketball practitioners than ever now starting to explore what these ideas are. And really, we're just coming across it from a very authentic way of us just sharing what we found works, applying these ideas. And, it's very daunting when you first come across the research, because obviously it's not basketball specific and there's a lot of very complex language. So I think what transforming does is just accelerate that learning curve for coaches to understand what this is and how they can start to properly harness these ideas. And, we've got a lot of obviously free content. We've got a membership site, some different products, a podcast. And luckily, I've got a great team of people running this for me, because obviously I'm, my day to day, I can't do it. I'm so focused on the Cavs, but it's really nice to see the impact we're having. We got federations all over the world who are, using our ideas, who are using us to write curriculums, train their coaches, and it's great that that the basketball coaching world is kind of progressing in this direction and moving away from all the old stuff.
So looking back, was there ever a moment where a coach or even like an organization told you like, yeah, like you changed our outlook on how we do things in our program?
Yeah, those are the most satisfying messages we get, Ashton, because we get them quite frequently from coaches at all levels, and I think it's that's the most rewarding part of this, where all the stuff I did in Italy is really just being used for good purposes to help coaches, and I think it's the main, obviously our main market is youth coaches. That's what all our content's for, and I think the most common theme is coaches saying it's fun to coach again. And that's really what it is. It's about a far more creative way of coaching than just doing the same thing that everyone else does in terms of the same drills, teaching the same moves. It's a far more, intellectually stimulating way to coach because you really have to think. And I think it's really cool to see so many coaches fall in love with coaching again.
So I know like from when I was growing up playing basketball, like a lot of trainers they would do like, kind of like stationary ball handling drills, a lot of chair drills and stuff like that. What is your thoughts on like advantage drills with like a weak side defender rotating over a guy like, like sometimes the offensive player starts on an advantage, like kind of like a step on the primary defender, and then it's kind of like a 2-on-1. What are your thoughts on like those types of drills?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think those are good, but they have to be constrained well to get the full benefit from them. And I think this whole approach, it's rooted in a skill acquisition framework known as ecological dynamics. So all that is a framework to make sense of how human beings move and how skills emerge within sports settings. So then what that leads to is then the coaching methodology of the constraints that approach, which is the methodology coaches can use to harness these ideas. And I think the big problem is that this gets confused a lot with let's just create a small-sided game, aka
Mhm.
something involving a defender, and let the players go. And that's really not what this isn't about because that approach is just not specific enough to develop the players and get them finding and exploring new movement solutions. So that's where the constraints come into the equation. So if we were to do, say an advantage activity where we have, let's say really simple, it's a 2-on-2. We have a player on the weak side dunker, a help defender guarding them, and then we have the offensive player start right behind their defender who's facing the basket and the ball is on the back. So as soon as they, remove the ball, obviously that's going to be a temporary 2-on-1 advantage that defender's trying to recover. Well, if we just do that and we explain the start and we say go play, that is going to be better than doing drills, but probably not much better because they might resort to the same solutions or they might just start doing things which actually aren't that useful for the game. So how would constrain it? Well, firstly, we'd say, okay, maybe you can only score a gold medal shot. That's a shot close to the rim. It's a
Mhm.
2-on-1. That's really the only shot we should be getting here. So that's the first constraint. The second constraint is we're going to say you have a one pass max. Why? Because if you start taking more than that, then well, you probably would have lost the advantage in the game because defense would have recovered back to neutral. And then maybe the last constraint is there's going to be a 4-second shot clock. So by doing those constraints, it completely changes the activity because now it's going to be way harder, number one. And B, they're actually going to start doing things which will transfer to 5-on-5 when you have extra players in there. So then it's a case of just continuing to change constraints from there. So maybe changing the start position every time with the driver beginning in a different location, changing the advantage. Sometimes it could be smaller, sometimes bigger, sometimes it could be neutral, and they've got to create the advantage. Beginning that second play on a different location, right? So the whole essence of this approach is simply variability. So, but it's not random, superfluous variability, it's strategic variability, doing things for intention, for a reason, based on the principles of play for the team, based on the individual rate limiters, the things that the players need to improve on individually. And when you factor in those two things, then that's when you design the constraints. So it's a very systematic way of coaching where it's a lot of people think it's very laissez-faire when they watch this for the first
Mhm.
time, because obviously it looks messy and it's very different to what we see conventionally in basketball with drills and do this where everything looks perfect, neat and tidy, and then it has no transfer to the game. This obviously is can be very difficult when people first watch this because it really challenges what we've always thought about skill and how players get better, but obviously it's supported by a huge body of research.
I can agree with you on that note. Like a lot of my trainers, especially my trainer Evan, he always tells me that like I rather you like trash when we work out because he like throws a lot of like these things that like mess with your mind. And when we work out, like I'd rather you like trash here so then like it's easy, it like clicks perfectly well like in the game. Because a lot of people like, yeah, you can do like your catch and shoot shooting drills, like you come off curls, like that's like getting your shots up. But like he always like kind of like tests me in a way like these weird drills that I'm like, why are we doing this half of the time? But it's like it actually does like click in the game. So I can like agree with you on that note. So let's take it to your time with the Rip City Remix. You were a director of player development and an assistant coach as well. So what was it like building the player development system for the Rip City Remix during their first year?
Yeah, it was really fun. I mean, I was fortunate to work with such great people. I was brought in originally by assistant GM of the Blazers, Sergio Oliva. Sergi's really passionate about these ideas and the competitive advantage they bring. But was really fortunate. Had a great head coach in Jim Moran, awesome GM of the G League, Danny O'Connor's, and really fun experience for me to figure out better how these ideas resonate with pros. And I think I'd had some experience before that because I was working with Paris basketball in the Euro Cup. And that was my first experience figuring out how you do this with pros, because obviously it is a bit different to youth, but it's not that much different. And I think it's just more how you present and explain things to the players and how you really get their buy-in. And it's easy. I never think players are the problem. It's more getting buy-in from coaches. But really enjoyed the experience. I came up with a lot of ideas that I felt resonated with systems, strategies, and then the practical on-court for how to create a PD system in the NBA. So a lot of the ideas and things I was testing was a great stepping stone for my Cavs job. And obviously, I took a lot of the things I was working on, a lot of the ideas I developed, and just made them better when I joined the Cavs.
So as we all know, the G League is known for like sudden changes and call-ups. How did you help players stay grounded and like ready for their call-ups at the end of the day to the main roster?
Yeah, I think it's just I wouldn't really say there's one thing or one magic thing you say to them. It's more just embracing kind of the daily schedule routines, like things like being really consistent with your vitamins, and that's not just on court, but like what you're doing off court in the weight room, the training room, continuing to learn through film. I think it's really just going about your processes, and I'm really more about processes and committing to those than anything else. So I think it's the more you take care of that, then obviously you're putting yourself in a better position to get those call ups. I'd never go about talking about those things or having to talk about that with the players. It's more, take care of your business every day, and then everything will take care of itself from there.
So currently you're the director of player development for the Cleveland Cavaliers. So when you first arrived in Cleveland, what was your plan for assessing basically the team's player development needs?
Yeah, so obviously a lot of that comes from head coach and front office down, and really fortunate to work for a head coach like Kenny Atkinson, who is so innovative, so evidence-based, and I think a trailblazer. I mean, really, I'd say probably the first head coach to go all in with an evidence-based approach in the NBA, which is huge in my belief. So very fortunate to have that and have a coach who cares so deeply about player development. So, obviously, I can't give state secrets, but I think people will know, obviously, if I'm hired for the Cavs, then we're going to be doing the constraints that approach. So that obviously is that's public knowledge. But obviously, I can't go into the nitty gritty of how we're using the CLA. But obviously, it's been all my ideas over the last few years. And just being a great platform to apply these ideas at the highest level. We've got a great organization, great players, and it's been very, very enjoyable just applying this in an NBA context.
I mean, just to go off what Coach Atkinson has done in his illustrious NBA career, like now he has actual like talent at his disposal to like put out there on the floor. I remember back when he was in Brooklyn, like I was in ninth grade, that roster wasn't the most talented roster, but we see guys like D'Angelo Russell making huge strides and making an all-star team that year. Spencer Dinwiddie, Rondé Hollis Jefferson, even like guys like that like kind of making such a big impact and taking their team all the way to the first round of the NBA playoffs. And no one really thought Brooklyn was going to do anything that year. So we've seen him lead a team before in the past, and now it's just amazing to see him like have such talent at his disposal. But this
Yeah.
Cavs team made a run for the top seed in the East this past season. What are your takeaways from this season?
Yes, I mean, so many learnings. I think, coming in with a new coaching staff, and we got the job pretty late. So, figuring things out quickly on the fly and all that was a great challenge. But obviously, a remarkable season for us. And I think we have so much momentum heading into next year. I think everyone is really excited about where we're at. And I think great chance for us to build on last season and take it further with some playoff success.
So I had to ask about these guys. Evan Mobley coming off a Defensive Player of the Year season, and Donovan Mitchell as well. What is it like working with these guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing when your best players are so humble and so dedicated about their craft and getting better. So, they deserve every success. And I think Kenny's principles of play really align well with this group and just puts players in the best positions to succeed. That's really what it's all about.
So you've been a part of other organizations in the past and have been around high level basketball as well. What do you think Cavs culture really like kind of sets itself apart from the rest?
Great question. I think really just, it's tough to answer because I can't reveal any specifics of, what we're doing on the day to day and all of that. But kind of top line general answers, I'm just going to give you just the power of kind of thinking differently and bringing in some unique ideas that might not be so common across the NBA, but I think players always understand the why if you can explain it. And I think it's creating a culture where it's one of like innovation, continuous growth, trying to get better every day. I really think that resonates with everyone.
So looking back at your incredible journey, global journey, let's say, what single principle ties all of it together?
For me, it would just be continuous learning. And I am not a I have not had a conventional kind of career in terms of, you know, going through coach like have being mentored by coaches for a number of years or working in the system for years. I came really from Europe straight to the G League, 1 year in the G League and then the NBA. And I think the only reason why I was able to do that is because of all the things I've just continuously focused on learning about. And I think there's kind of two ways you can go about building your career. And just from what I've seen being in the US these last 2 seasons, I think the first way is continuous networking. And I'm not saying that that is not important. I get it. It's one way you can get a job, but I intentionally avoided all of that. And the way I kind of approach this is I'm going to try and learn as much as I can to have a bit of a unique perspective that allows me to offer value. And maybe I'm not going to think the conventional way, and And I'm not going to be different to be different, but I'm going to be different to be effective. And I think that's very important because it's not just, you can't just come up with different ideas for the sake of being different. It has to work and it has to be effective. And I think through continuous learning and being obsessed with learning and from all sports, learning this motor learning research from the professors and all of this, it made sure that when I did have an opportunity, I was really ready for it. And then by doing a good job in the opportunities I had, it naturally led to the next one. And I've never really focused on networking whatsoever. The relationships that I've developed have all been authentic, and I've developed them from the angle of here's an idea to work on, or here's something I tried in my last film session that really resonated with the players, or this is what we did in the weight room today to apply a CLA approach. And it was sharing those ideas with coaches, with front office personnel. That was kind of what led to where I got today. It was very natural. It wasn't forced. And I just think it's a really nice way to go about things because it's, you get better, you learn at the same time, and then naturally, you're putting yourself in a position for opportunities when they come up.
So if you look like 5 or 10 years down the line in the future, where do you see yourself? What are your future aspirations for your career?
Yeah, I honestly don't really set them, Ashton. I'm just so focused on, each season just crushing my role and letting business take care of itself. I don't like saying, oh, I want to be here because you never know. Life is unpredictable. Basketball is unpredictable. Like the one thing I'm committed to is my personal values and making sure I'm always working somewhere where I can be myself. Because obviously it wouldn't make much sense to be in an environment where I couldn't use these ideas. So obviously that's why I'm so grateful to be a part of the Cavs and the whole organization. Also, we got an incredible front office, awesome coaching staff. I think we're all really pulling in the right direction, and that's really all I care about. Just nail the present, and everything takes care of itself from there.
And finally, for the next generation of coaches coming up, what do you think is the most important mindset that they should have to basically truly transform basketball in their own communities?
Great question. So that would be don't do something just because it's always been done that way. And you can apply that mantra to anything, whether it's how you approach practice planning, how you coach in a game, how you give feedback to your players. I think so much of not just basketball, but the sports world it's this concept of path dependency where we just keep doing what was done before us based on, the people who came before us. And we see so much innovation in technology, everything with AI nowadays. And it's like none of these companies would have got to where they are if they just kept doing what everyone before them did. And unfortunately, this hasn't clicked on yet in basketball. So for me, it's kind of like how I view it is if I was doing what I did last season, next season, and I was doing it exactly the same way, well, that's just inadequate because I haven't got better and I haven't brought anything different to help the team get better. So we should always be innovating. We should always be reflecting critically on ourselves and how we're operating. And I think naturally what that leads to, Ashton, is for any coach, any front office personnel, I would say do everything you can to learn about motor learning. It's going to be the future of the sport. Baseball's, the most advanced. Basketball's going in that direction. So, do everything you can to learn about what these concepts mean, and how you can start to apply them. And obviously, I think my book is a great starting point for that. But yeah, things are trending in this direction. So if you understand what it is and you can do it, you're naturally at an advantage.
Well, Coach Sarama, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity today, and I wish you the best of luck with this off season as well as the upcoming season.
Thank you so much, Ashton. Been a pleasure to do this, and all the best with the podcast.
Thanks for listening to Gen Z Hoops. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe on Instagram, LinkedIn, and all major social media platforms at Gen Z Hoops. You can tune in and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and every other podcast platform on the planet. Get ready for the next episode.